Welcome, Annette, to the Happy at Work podcast. I'm delighted to have you as my guest today. It's really great to connect with you this morning. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners, give people a bit of a flavour of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, Aoife. Thanks a lot for inviting me. My name is Annette Cashell. So my background is marketing. I worked as a marketing manager for 10 years in Germany in Silicon Valley, and I started having health problems. So eventually I ended up being a Pilates teacher, and my health problems continued. So from that point on, then I did some research and I realized that I was called an active couch potato. So I fell into that category of being an active couch potato,
I think I
which
can relate to that,
yeah, which
Annette.
really shocked me as a Pilates teacher. I'd given up my desk job. I was a Pilates teacher. Why was my health falling apart? And why was I categorized an active couch potato?
Yeah.
So a couch,
Where can I ask where
yeah,
that categorization comes from?
yeah. So well, it's been around really since 1996 when
Okay.
when the U.S. Surgeon General first wrote a report on sitting disease and how sitting was really bad for you and all the
Mm.
diseases associated with it. And basically, from that came the idea of a couch potato, somebody who never moves. We all know what that means. An active couch potato could be somebody who goes to the gym every day, even for 2 hours a day. But what do they do for the rest of the day? And it turns out
Interesting.
most of us sit for the rest of the day. So we're just as inactive as a couch potato for most of the day, except for that intense bout of maybe an hour or two. And if it's 1 hour, it's only 6% more active than a couch potato who never moves. So that
Wow.
really, it's a shock to you as a human. It's a shock to your ego as a Pilates teacher, certainly. And I
Yeah.
started to realize how little I moved outside my teaching time. So I changed how I moved, and I was able to avoid a neck fusion operation that I was due to have because of the lack of movement that I was doing. So since then, I've become a bit of a zealot about my movement, which is about 6 years ago. So I call myself now a movement coach. I'm also a Pilates teacher and I'm a social entrepreneur.
Great. Brilliant. I love that backstory. And it's time to get real now. I can relate to all of this. And that statistic is shocking to me that if you do 1 hour of movement or go to the gym, it's only 6% more active than a couch
Mm,
potato. Now,
mm,
at the start of this year, I started the 100 days of walking. It was tough because, you start on the 1st of January, it's cold, it's wet,
yeah.
it's dark. But I ploughed on through it. I got to the 100 days and I thought, I've done 100. Why not go for 200? And got to 200 and I was like, well, here we go. I'm going to go for 365, and recently reached the milestone, which I forgot completely to acknowledge, was 265, which means 100 days left in the year of doing this every day. But I mean, to me, that's really shocking that I'm getting out every day. And sometimes, to be honest, it could be a 15 or 20-minute walk. I think next year I'll plan it a little bit more strategically and think I'll get to the 10,000 steps. But maybe let's start
Mm.
there with those kind of really shocking statistics. And what does the ideal scenario then look like?
Yeah, so the good news is you don't have to go to the gym for 3 hours a day, for example.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're doing exercise, keep doing it. That's fantastic. But you need to add movement to the rest of the day. So exercise,
Okay.
there's a difference between exercise and movement. So
Yeah.
exercise is usually something that involves putting on a different pair of shoes. Maybe you drive somewhere, you put on special clothes, you usually break a sweat. And what I think is important about exercise is when you've done it, you tend to tick it off your mental list. I've done
Oh,
that for
yeah.
the
Yeah.
day.
Oh,
Now I'm
yeah.
off the hook. I don't have
Yeah.
to move the rest of the day. Whereas
Yeah.
movement, it sounds bad, but movement is all the rest of the day. So it
Yeah.
could be standing up, making yourself a cup of coffee, just getting out of your chair. It could be taking washing out of the washing machine. It could be letting the cat out. It could be doing jumping jacks if that's your thing. But it's basically just getting out of your chair, changing your body posture so you're not
Mm.
sitting in that stillness. And standing is a stillness. So this is another myth I'd like to bust. So if you've got a standing desk and you're congratulating yourself for a standing 8 hours a day, it's just as still as sitting.
Okay, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah,
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 is that one of the solutions to get standing instead of being
yeah.
sitting
So
all
I don't
day?
have a standing desk, but certainly standing is a lovely way to break up sitting. And it's the
Yeah,
breaking up, it's the changing. So ideally, they say you're moving every half an hour for 3 minutes in general. So that could be getting up, opening a window, getting a glass of water, whatever. In terms
yeah.
of sitting versus standing, what they say to aim for is to stand for about 20 minutes of every hour.
Okay.
So you could sit for say you have a Zoom call. I always say start every Zoom call standing because you will get tired. And the
Okay.
idea is not to stand all day. So stand at the start of the Zoom call. After about 10, 15 minutes, you get tired, sit down in your chair. And
Mm.
then the last 8 minutes of the hour, you do some kind of movement or stretching or walking around. That would be the ideal
Yeah.
mix. Not everybody's ready for that. So if you've never done this, just aim to move every hour
Mm.
and then start reducing it. But you definitely want to mix the sitting and the standing. The goal is
Yeah.
not to stand all day. That's it's your body gets used to that. It all the same disadvantages of sitting all day will accumulate if you stand all day as well.
Okay, yeah, that's so interesting. And
Mm.
now I used to wear a Fitbit. I stopped wearing it kind of midsummer of last year. It stopped working. I didn't kind of intentionally decide I'm not going to wear my Fitbit anymore. But one thing with that, with wearing the Fitbit, I would get the little vibration
Mm.
on the 10 to hour every
Yeah,
hour.
yeah,
And I know that that is supposed to act as a reminder to kind of get up and move around and stuff, which is great. For me, what it ended up being was, oh, it's 10 to the hour. That's good to know, and not
yeah,
really taking any action with it. I
yeah.
love that idea of starting a Zoom meeting by standing up. And, if you're not used to it, you might get tired after a few minutes and sit
Mm.
down. But then I'm just wondering, if most people are on wireless headsets now, is the opportunity to turn off cameras towards the end of that meeting and just take a walk around the room for the last, and
Yeah,
I encourage people not to have back-to-back meetings. So if you're booking meetings
yeah.
for an hour, then maybe consider booking meetings for 50 minutes instead of an hour. But whatever kind of meeting you have, take that opportunity to, okay, stand at the start, sit down, and then cameras off and take a walk around and get people talking about doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, you don't even, if it's one-on-one, it's probably easier to have that conversation. But then if there's
Mm.
a leader within the group or a chair of the meeting or something like that, encourage people to actually take that time. Because I've been in meetings where a lot of people have their cameras turned off. I've been in other meetings where most people have their cameras turned on. But maybe there's an opportunity at the end to be like, okay,
Yeah,
let's get some movement
absolutely.
in.
Yeah. And even with the camera on, you can have a tennis ball under your sole of your foot and you can be massaging your feet. That's
Okay.
really important too. You could be doing a calf stretch, which I do
Yeah.
all the time, which have a book under the sole of your foot, and do a calf stretch. So there are things you can do certainly with the camera on.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you start moving around, it can be distracting. So yeah, I think taking the camera off is a great idea to allow you
Okay.
to physically walk
Yeah.
or do overarm stretches, whatever that might
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
distracting. But
Yeah.
certainly, if it comes from the top that this is okay to do, that's really important.
Yeah.
Obviously, in any kind of corporate environment, that's the environment I come from. If you don't have permission to move, you are not going to be the person
Yeah.
who's switching off the camera or moving side to side across the screen. So it
This is
has to come
it.
from the top. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a couple of things I want to point out there. I've clearly made an assumption that movement means getting up and standing and walking around when actually it doesn't necessarily have to be, and you can do stuff, and we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. But the other thing is this idea of organizational permission, which we have
Yeah.
spoken about before. The kind of an extension of creating a psychologically safe environment. I know Duana Blomstrom spoke specifically about that piece of organizational permission. Getting that permission coming from the top, I think, is crucially important. If you don't feel safe enough to actually speak up and ask about this in the first place, maybe consider the type of environment that you're working in anyway. If it's safe to bring in new ideas into the organization, then bring those new ideas in. If you are a
Yeah.
leader, maybe introduce this with your team first before introducing it wider to the wider organization.
Yeah, so I've done programs for primary schools. That's part of my social entrepreneur work. And part of that is giving permission for children to move. So we'd have literally posters up saying, you can jump here, you can skip
Oh,
here.
brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
And then for the office, you'd have a sign going, it's okay to stand here. So you'd have an office, a meeting room, and you'd have a section at the back going, if you want to stand, this would be a good place to stand. And
Okay.
just a tiny bit like that is like, oh, okay. I feel not strange now,
Yeah,
getting out of my chair and standing here. I'm not distracting anybody else. And I've been
yeah.
given permission by this sign. So something as simple as that can really make a change.
Yeah. Well, there's another good point as well. I think being, casting my mind back to being in a physical office when I worked in corporate as well. And I think the bonus of walking from meeting to meeting, and then 18 months of we're only on Zoom and you're sitting between meetings, you're not actually physically getting up and walking. But when we go back into the office, the opportunity is to introduce more of that. And like you say, give people the permission and hints and prompts as to, I love that idea. You can stand over here. You can, and I'm thinking, let's adopt some ideas from the kids. You could do some jumping jacks here if you want to get some movement in. Why not? You can do some skipping here. Here's a skipping rope. I love that. I love that idea. And especially with people are starting to go back into the office, whether they like it or not, that's a conversation for a whole other day. But whether people like it or not, there is this shift back towards the office. I know some people are really looking forward to it. Some people are happy with the flexibility that they have at home. And again, a conversation for a different day, how to introduce that type of flexibility when you are back working in the office. Is it 9 to 5? Is it starting earlier to miss the traffic? All of those kind of things, to have a shorter commute, all of that stuff. But maybe talk to us a little bit more about like what can we do, whether it's at home, whether it's in the office, what kind of things can we actually do?
Well, the number one thing is to sit less. I mean, the sitting is something that people spend at least 8 hours a day on average doing. And we know sitting is very bad. So sitting less, which means breaking up your sitting. So again, it's not standing all day. So that could be, for example, standing at the start of every Zoom call. It could be taking more breaks, setting your timer every half an hour, putting the phone in the other room. So you have to get up and go to the phone and switch it off. Don't have it beside you where you can just hit snooze because you will not get up. What I do also is I unplug my computer and bring it over somewhere to work. And then eventually the battery will die. So I'll have to get up and come back and plug it in.
Yeah.
So these are really artificial ways to crowbar movement into your day. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes, to get yourself to sit less. That would be the number one thing. That's the number one thing. And the more you walk, obviously, the less you're sitting. So that's fantastic. Try to, if you are continuing to work from home, and do your artificial commute. So you literally walk around your block before you start work. Really good for if you're a biological clock, to get that daylight into your eyes and all that. It's a fantastic way to start the day. Do it at the end of the day, so that's your commute at the end of the day. It could only be 5 minutes. That's fine. Lunchtime as well, get out 5 or 10 minutes. These are tiny ways to break up sitting and get you walking more. So it's kind of 2 for 1.
I tell people about that, the walking around the block more from a boundary perspective. So if you want to say, if you're working from home, that this is the start of my workday and this is the end of my workday, and at the start the laptop doesn't come out before the start of the workday, and the laptop goes away at the end of the workday, but you're putting like, it's a physical representation of the boundary between the start of work and the end of work. And I just thought that's a really nice idea. But it has the added benefit then, even if it's only 5 minutes, even if it's a few minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it might be, it has the added bonus of that's part of your movement within that day.
Part of your 10,000 steps, your 8,000 steps, whatever you're aiming for. It doesn't have to be 10 in one go. That's the thing. You can accumulate them, and it's just the same benefit as having your dedicated 1 hour. And it's fine to mix it up. There'll be days where you want to have a dedicated 1 hour, go for it. But also getting outside is so good for your eyes. We know that the short-sightedness is becoming an epidemic in many parts of the world because of screen usage. And they've been able to undo that in schools in China, for example, by forcing the children to go out at lunchtime during school breaks. They've taken away for study time. And then their eyesight had deteriorated. Just by letting them go out at lunchtime, letting them see in the distance, was enough to start remedying.
I didn't know that there was an epidemic about that, but I did hear a hack, for want of a better word. I think it's called 20-20-20. So it might be something like every 20 minutes you look 20 meters in the distance for 20 seconds or something like that. And I just thought that's brilliant. And I started trying to do that when I've kind of shifted around my office a little bit now, but when I was facing a window, it was easy to do because I could look straight out, into the distance through the window, which was really nice. And it was something that I did. I tried to do it regularly enough. Probably my eyes were getting tired, so they naturally kind of were drawn to the longer distances. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, and looking out the window, if you're seeing nature as a double bonus again, it relaxes your nervous system,
Mm.
calms you down, clears your mind. So everything is connected. We kind of know all this, but we've been trained to think that to get our work done, we have to sit still for this amount of time and we have to stay concentrated for this amount of time. And all the studies show that the more breaks you take, within reason, obviously, the better
Yeah.
your mind is, the better your body is, the happier you are, happier at
Yeah.
work. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything gets done that way.
Yeah, it's a few things to pick up on there. You mentioned about the knowing, doing. We know all of this, so why isn't it that we're doing it? Any thoughts around that? And I know for myself, taking those breaks, especially when I was working in corporate, you're so in the zone and you're so feeling this high pressure to get something done. You have to deliver something to a client. You have to finish a piece of work, and the thoughts of taking a break, even just for 5 minutes to clear your head, are just like, you wouldn't even
Yeah,
dream of doing that.
yeah,
But actually, the times that I did take a break, it made a huge difference because it
yeah,
clears your mind and you're able to think and process a lot more easily. But when you're
yeah,
in the zone and so focused, you think that you're doing all your best work and you think
yeah.
you're doing all your best thinking, but you're actually not.
Yeah, I guess when you're in the zone, obviously you're in the zone. You might be sitting there for an hour and a half working on something. That's fine. You don't have to break up every lot of work that you do. But I was thinking about this as well because when I first started working, this is before it was, we were on emails and stuff, and we actually got up a lot more. So I would get up to the photocopier, I would get up to the fax machine, I would
Yeah,
get up and hand my colleague, a piece of paper in their inbox.
yeah,
So we were still getting the work done, but there was a culture of movement, mini movement, because just that's the way the office was. There wasn't a
yeah,
question of sending emails, whereas now it is, because it's possible to sit all day, doesn't necessarily mean it's better for us. And I think
yeah,
slowly corporates are realizing that there is permission to move, people will work better. But certainly even 15 years ago, that would have been, as you say, maybe frowned upon if you took regular, I'm going out for 5 minutes. Whereas now I think slowly things are changing. People are realizing, even just for their mental health, it's important to take a break away.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's brilliant. And I do remember those days. And I'm trying to, I remember when I sent my first email when I was in fourth year in school and it was the excitement of it all. But it's so true, like being in the office and someone is sitting a few desks away from you and you send an email rather than actually go in and have a conversation. Now, I've been in both scenarios where you actually get up and have a conversation, and I've been in the other where it's like, oh, the culture here is we send emails about everything rather than
What are you
speaking to
doing on my
people.
desk? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, to reduce,
yeah,
like whether it's to reduce the noise or whatever. And
yeah,
have heard examples where companies really clamp down on that internal email, because internal emails, it's like, what's the point? You can
yeah.
follow up with an email, or you can, people are using Slack and things to capture that type of information. But maybe consider before sending that email, can you actually have a conversation with someone physically, or on a side note, which is probably less about movement, but like, can you have a conversation over Zoom instead of sending an email?
Yeah, exactly. And I love the idea you mentioned earlier about the 50-minute meetings. I think that's really important as well,
Yeah,
allowing that 10 minutes. They
yeah.
brought that into schools as well when all the kids went online, when they realized kids it's back to back.
Oh, of
And they were
course.
just sitting all
Yeah,
day. So they started
yeah.
bringing in 45, 50-minute classes and give them a 10-minute
Okay.
break where they actually get up and play outside
Yeah,
and then come back in. I mean, we know it from Finland school. This is slightly off topic in terms of corporate, but schools in Finland, and they ace all the reports in terms of
yeah.
academic achievement.
Happiness and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
they stay in the class for 45 minutes. Every 45 minutes they have a 15-minute break where they
Mm,
go out and then they've rejuvenated, come back, and they know they've focused only for 45 minutes, and then they take another 15-minute break.
yeah,
So I think we have a lot to learn from other cultures maybe that have it right in terms
yeah,
of schools. And from my personal point of view, children are desk workers too. We
yeah,
tend to focus on the desk workers, the adults, but children sit for long periods of time as well,
yeah,
particularly in the study years. So
yeah.
they
No, I
shouldn't be
mean,
forgotten.
you were saying it's kind of a different context, but I think there's a lot to be said for that, and there's a lot to learn from it, and that's probably where it starts.
Mm,
Like you're used to sitting down from 8:30 to 2:30 or whatever in the day, because you're at school all day. We had, I think, 2 breaks in the day. You had a short break and you had a long break for lunch, and then you would go out to yard and things like that. So I love this idea of 45 minutes. And that kind of brings us back to the other point I wanted to pick up on, which is this idea of focused work. And I have read Cal Newport's books about, he talks about, I can't remember, digital detoxing basically is one book. And the other one then is Deep Work, where he talks about getting that sense of focus and minimizing distractions. And I suppose the perception in my mind is you can spend 2 to 3 hours doing your deep work. But maybe in building on that, we can introduce those breaks that we need to have to do that movement while we're doing that deep work. So we have minimized distractions, they're away, but actually why not introduce very specific movement or stepping away from your desk to clear your head so that you can come back a little bit more focused. Like, I suppose in my mind, it was like, isolate yourself from everything, turn off your internet, go and write something or use your laptop, but with no connection to the internet, so that you're not getting you're not tempted to go down the YouTube rabbit hole or anything like that. Yeah. But I suppose that was my perception. But maybe in building on that, maybe we can look at like, okay, so what else can we do to help us to be more focused during those 3 to 4 hours?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on the individual. I mean, if I'm working on an article to write, I would literally shut down everything. As you say, I'm not going to move in that hour physically. I'm actually focused on that. And that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
But the rest of the day will be, lots of movement. And I wouldn't be doing that every day. But certainly I think they say about 40 minutes is when the brain starts to lag. So you'd have to check your own natural, when do you want to take a break, but when you do, it's like the Pomodoro technique, isn't it?
Yeah.
You work, I think, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and you take your 5-minute break. That 5-minute break, as I said, doesn't have to be exercise. It could be looking out the window. It could be meditating. They are all still forms of movement, because meditation changes the way you breathe, which is part of your body. Looking at the window changes the muscles in your eyes. So we have to start looking at the body as a whole thing, not just, are we burning calories? And unfortunately, the "are we burning calories" message is the one we've been focused on for, I suppose, 40 years now. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're getting healthier. Yeah. So health is not necessarily the same as fitness. Mm-hmm. You could be very fit in certain aspects of your body, and other parts of your health could be deteriorating if you're not looking at the whole picture.
Yeah. Can you share some specific examples about that?
Well, you could have people who, for example, are training for a marathon, and they're doing all that training. They sit all day, and every evening they do it. Fantastic achievement. I mean, I could never do it. So, hands up there.
Kudos.
Yeah, absolutely. So they do all that training in the evening, and they're getting fitter. But the fact that they've sat all day is detrimental to their body. I compare it to a food analogy. So if you eat junk food all day, but have a fantastic healthy salad for dinner.
Okay, yeah.
That healthy salad is fantastic for you. Yeah. But it doesn't undo the junk food that you ate the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And sitting is a junk food, and doing that exercise in the evening, as good as it is for you, and there's no doubt the benefit exercise is good for you, it doesn't undo the damage of sitting. They're two separate risks.
Yeah.
We used to think that, okay, we sat all day, but we didn't intense, that's fine. It doesn't equate that way. We're looking at statistics now coming back from health, from populations that move all day, and they're doing better health wise than we who sit all day and then exercise intensely.
Yeah. And I do wonder where that came from, because you're so right. Like you're saying, it's in the last 40 years that we're focusing very much more on calories, but I suppose, and this total perception that it's like going back to our earlier conversation, it's a tick box exercise. I've done my walk now for the day, tick. And then this concept that you can do nothing all day, and I love the analogy with the food. Eat junk food all day, eat a salad, or eat something that has this healthy perception at the end of the day, and suddenly you're going to undo everything that you've done, and that's not really the case. I'd love to know, Annette, if people, I suppose, where can you begin? Like, what are the kind of small steps that people can take to start in this? If they identify with being an active couch potato, as I do now, based on, and I'm like, that just calling me an active couch potato makes me feel it is horrible. It is. What can people do to get started?
Well, the number one thing is to sit less.
Mm,
If you want to sign up to my newsletter, you'll get my How to Sit Less guide. And part of that is a sitting calculator. And I actively encourage everybody to do it because you have no idea how many hours you're sitting until you actually
yeah.
put in everything, commuting, TV, computer, lunch, breakfast, dinner, sitting time. Like it all just
Yeah.
adds up. So I
For
really,
those, I was going to say, for those not
yeah.
watching on video, my face just kind of made a very funny shape going.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the notification on my phone that I get every Monday morning at
Yeah.
9 o'clock saying, and I remember the first time I got it, it's like, oh, you used your phone for an average of 5 hours or whatever it might have been. And I was like, 5 hours over the course of 7 days, that's not too bad at all. Till I realized it was 5 hours per day, which is absolutely shocking. And maybe to bring that into the analogy of sitting, that, I suppose a couple of points here. You reach for your phone automatically, and maybe instead
Yeah.
of reaching for your phone, you stand up, or you, like you said earlier, put your phone in a different room. But the other thing is, we tend to. So if I'm using my phone for 5 hours a day, I'm not using it for 5 hours at a time. So therefore, it doesn't feel like I'm using it for 5 hours a
Yeah.
day. But my notification says, and this, you're using it for 5 hours a day, but it's only small bursts at a time of, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. But this is exactly what we could do for movement
Yeah.
instead. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would start with that because always good to have a baseline. The second idea is to sit differently. So like I'm sitting on the floor here, but I'm sitting on a bolster on the floor. You may not be ready to sit on the floor. You might want to sit on a yoga ball instead,
Okay.
or you sit on a chair that doesn't have a backrest, so sit on the
So you have to
stool
sit up a
or
bit
don't use
straighter.
a backrest. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not saying don't use a backrest all day because we're not ready for that, but just take a break from the backrest occasionally and you'll
Yeah.
notice how much you use it. And it's called a backrest for a reason. You rest your back, all your core
Okay.
muscles switch off, which is lovely now and again, but maybe take a break from it. So just sitting differently that way will make a difference to how your body experiences the day. Um, and the third thing I have is called sit better. So you won't be able to see this on the podcast, but I've brought along this wedge here. So it looks like a piece of cheese. It's like a cushion, but it's
Yeah.
slanted. It's a 10-degree angle. So most chairs you sit on today go the opposite way. They kind of force you to slouch back, like a
Yeah.
downward slope. And that's really hard to sit up straight because you're going
Hmm.
against gravity. So just putting a wedge like that on your chair, and I don't sell them or anything, is a really good way to change the angle of the chair. Like
You're not making a
relax.
commission on selling these.
No, no, not none of that. And in fact, you don't even need the wedge. You can get a towel, roll up the towel into a tight,
uh, like a
yeah, just
tube type of
yeah,
shape.
exactly. Put
Yeah.
it at the back of your chair. If you
Yeah.
sit on that, not at the backrest, a little further forward,
Yeah.
it's the same idea. You're sitting on a slant, so that automatically changes your posture.
Yeah.
You won't believe the difference in your neck. And people who work on screens, they all have neck issues, so
Yeah.
you won't believe the difference in your neck. I avoided the neck fusion from little changes like this.
Yeah.
Something like that can make a huge difference as well. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying give up all sitting. Sitting is going to happen. We live in a culture where there are chairs. You have to sit for some of your work, but you can certainly minimize it. You can change how you sit. And when you are sitting, you can sit better. So
Mm.
all of that will make your desk job a little bit less
Yeah.
damaging.
I'm pretty sure that my chair that I have, I can change the angle that I sit at
Yeah,
so that I
yeah,
can move the back of it up, I tip it
yeah,
up slightly.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure when I was assembling it that
yeah, yeah.
I found that I could do that. So I might have a look into that again. Annette, before we wrap up, I'd love to know more, I suppose, what the impact of these changes will be for people on their health, on their overall happiness, and I suppose how their happiness at work.
Okay, well, it all comes back to the report in 1996 where they came up with the term sitting disease. And that just means
Yeah.
that sitting for long periods of time, excessive sitting,
Yeah.
leads to increased risk in loads of diseases: diabetes type 2, obesity, cardiovascular disease, certain cancers. Like sitting for more than 6 hours a day increases your chance of breast cancer,
Wow.
and premature death. So it actually takes years off your life. We know that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to give up sitting completely, but
Yeah.
you have to look at it a different way. I actually did a blog about this saying if sitting isn't you smoking, then your chair is a cigarette.
Yeah.
And if you start thinking of your chair as a cigarette, you would minimize your use of it. And that's
Yeah.
really, it is a tool and it's helpful, but there you could have a different relationship, I guess, with
Yeah.
your chair. Kind of
Yeah.
start using it less, start sitting better. Um, Otherwise, unfortunately, we run the risk of developing all these issues, not just the diseases, but what I see on a daily basis is the neck pain, the hip pain, um, the lower back pain, pelvic floor dysfunction. These are the issues, bone loss. So the more you
Mm.
sit, the less bone building you have. These are the day-to-day niggles and things that take away the quality of your life. So even if
Yeah.
you're a bit nebulous about this long-term chance of disease, your chances are you're having aches and pains in your life from just having sat in a chair for this
Yeah.
amount of time.
Yeah.
So you will start to feel better instantly. Your brain will start to work better,
Mm.
um, and you'll just start to work better as well.
Yeah. 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 No, I love that. Annette, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, what makes you happier at work?
Okay, love that question. Of course, two parts for me, so mind and body.
Yeah.
So body, obviously, if I'm able to move around, I'm happy. So if I'm sitting
Yeah.
on the floor, I'll have my setup the way I want it with the
Mm.
option to move around. So that's always happiest for me. And then in terms of mind and what I get out from work is definitely having an impact. So, seeing people who are taking on board what I'm talking about is always it just lights me up. And the work I do is very practical. Like I'm
Yeah.
a big believer in making it as practical and as simple as possible
Yeah.
and as
Same as myself.
easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy to bring into your everyday. So I'm not saying buy expensive equipment or loads of time for this. You literally crowbar it. It just kind of integrates into your day. And I
Yeah.
think that's the way you make change. It's just you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just there.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that. And if people want to connect with you, what's the best way they can do that if they want to reach out and connect on social media or your website?
Sure. So I'm very active on Instagram. My handle there is at Movement Makeovers. My website is www.malahidepilates.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, Annette Cashell. So I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in connecting with me there.
Brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed our chat. Learned a lot about myself and the fact that I'm an active couch potato, and some really, really great and practical tips that people can bring in, whether they're working in the office or whether they're still working at home or for when they're working at home. Because I, I can see that there's a lot of people who are doing the hybrid model as well. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.